an egg cup on the table, cradling more than breakfast. Welcome to Faded Echoes. I am your host, Umbra. Tell me where you're listening from. Your voices breathe life into these tales. I always treasure your comments. Let's dive in. If you ever want to see Nero Wolfe's mood swing from passive contentment to the kind of thundercloud that makes weather forecasters nervous, try interrupting him in the middle of breakfast. I don't mean the routine interference of a telephone call or a knock at the front door. Those he'll endure with the resignation of a monk who knows the world outside his cloister is both noisy and unnecessary. I mean an actual physical interruption of the meal itself. That's what happened the morning this thing with the egg cup began. I was at my usual spot at the table, surveying the Gazette, while Wolfe attended to his soft-boiled eggs with the solemnity of a priest handling sacred objects. Fritz had, as always, set everything with precision. Silver polished, napkins folded just so, the eggs brought in at exactly the right consistency. You could have conducted surgery in that kitchen with fewer instruments than Fritz used for preparing breakfast. Wolfe had his favorite egg cup, white porcelain with a thin blue band, clamped between his thumb and forefinger, spoon poised for the ceremonial crack. Then he frowned. That in itself wasn't newsworthy. Wolfe frowns at the world the way some men smile at it. But this was different. He stopped, tilted the cup slightly, and peered inside with the same intensity he reserves for orchids and enemy testimony. He set the spoon down, leaned back, and called, "Archie." "Yes, sir," I said, putting down the paper. "The egg has committed lèse-majesté?" "Observe." I got up, circled to his side of the table, and bent down. Inside the cup, nestled against the white of the porcelain, was a ring. Gold with a square emerald, the stone dark as a bottle-green shadow. Not a trinket, not something that could have slipped from Fritz's hand without him noticing. The thing looked like it had been placed there on purpose, the way a calling card gets slipped under a door. Wolfe's face didn't change, but the air in the room did. Breakfast had been violated. That was serious. I picked up the egg cup, held it closer. Well, either someone in this house is proposing or Fritz has been running a side business as a jeweler. Want me to ask him? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. No, he would not trifle with me, nor would he be so clumsy. So the ring walked in here itself. I admit, it's got the legs for it. I rolled the emerald in my palm. It was heavy, masculine, and definitely worth more than the combined annual salaries of the Brownstone staff, including me. Question is, how did it get into your breakfast service without Fritz knowing? Unless you've got a secret admirer with keys to the pantry, plea. Wolfe tugged at his beard. Someone entered this house. His tone was flat, but the subtext was fireworks. You don't just walk into Nero Wolfe's house and slip jewelry into his egg cup. Not unless you have a death wish or talent for suicide by deduction. Want me to call Inspector Kramer? I asked, half knowing the answer. No, we shall not summon the police. Not yet. He reached for his beer glass. Yes, beer at breakfast. And sipped. Someone intends to engage me. This is the device. It has the odor of contrivance. I slipped the ring into my pocket, feeling its weight drag against the fabric. So the question is it a job offer or a warning? Wolfe looked at me with that bland expression that means he already knows, but won't tell me until he feels like it. It is an intrusion, Archie. And intrusions must be answered. That was the hook. Breakfast was officially ruined. Wolfe would brood, I would run around asking questions, and before long, the Brownstone would be as busy as Grand Central at rush hour. All because someone decided an egg cup made the perfect delivery system for a ring. The thing about a ring in an egg cup is you can't treat it like a casual garnish. Wolfe didn't. He finished looking at it the way a man looks at a riddle that insists on being admired before it's solved, and told me to bring the safe box from the desk. I set the ring on a sheet of paper, rolled it once with my thumb to see if it had any bashful inscriptions, and there it was, faint, like a secret said through a handkerchief. 2 initials, HV, and the stamp of a Fifth Avenue jeweler whose invoices, I happen to know, can make grown men weep. I didn't name it out loud. If the jeweler was going to be part of my day, I preferred to let it happen to me naturally. "Put it away," Wolfe said. "We shall not leave it lying about like a trinket." I slid the paper and ring into a small envelope, sealed it, and lodged it in the safe. Wolfe's spoon lay on the linen beside an egg he had not cracked. If you think that's a small detail, you don't know Nero Wolfe. He will let a murderer pace a carpet to get his gate, but he will not let a soft-boiled egg cool without cause. The cause was in the safe. The bell rang. It had the particular insistence of a finger that thinks doors are suggestions. Fritz from the kitchen called, "I'll get it," and Wolfe said, "No, Archie." He didn't raise his voice. He never does when he's moving a piece on the board that hasn't learned it's a piece yet. I went and opened up to a woman who had dressed with the first idea of not being noticed and the second of being ready anyway. Late 20s, hat simple, coat better than her purse, eyes that had slept with a worry and woken up with it. She had the sort of face that has learned to be brave about things that don't deserve bravery. "I'm looking for Mr. Wolfe," she said. I was told to be here at 9. She checked her watch, as if we were a train. "Schedule? It's 3 past. "Congratulations," I said. "You beat him to it by a ring." I gave her a slow pass with the eyes in case anything on her wanted to confess, then let her into the hall. "Your name?" "Evelyn Hartwell." If you think I didn't feel the safe in the next room, blink at that. You underestimate my relationship with inanimate objects. "Come on," I said, and took her to the office. Wolfe hadn't moved. The chair had him like a throne has a monarch who didn't pick it so much as get born to it. He watched her cross the rug with that flat gaze he uses to see whether a new element is combustible. She stopped just short of the red leather chair I reserve for the decent. The yellow one is for the indecent and the green for the ones who don't know yet. I offered her red. She sat and folded her gloves into a small, obedient rectangle. "You are Miss Hartwell," Wolfe said. "Of the Hartwell firm?" "No." She looked at the fireplace and then back at him, which is a neat way of saying you know your audience. "Of the Hartwell family. My father was Harold Victor Hartwell. H. Voy. It isn't every morning you get to watch a coincidence take off its coat and stay a while." My eyebrows handled the commentary. "Then you are here," Wolfe said, "because you were told to be." She nodded. From her bag she produced a white envelope, creased as if it had been read with fingers that wanted to hurt it. She passed it to me. I took the note out. It was typed, anonymous, and helpful in the way a man on a dark street is helpful when he suggests you cross it. "Bring a retainer. Do not bring the police. 9 a.m. The answer is in the egg." "Egg," she said, as if the word had a taste. I didn't understand. It seemed absurd, but Mr. Wolfe, the ring my father wore, the emerald signet, vanished last week from our house. I reported it stolen, and then a man I don't know put this note through my mail slot last night. I didn't sleep. I came at once. "Alone?" Wolfe asked. She hesitated. And if you ever want to see Nero Wolfe's nostrils hint that they are working, put a pause in front of a yes. "No, my stepmother knows where I am. She insisted I tell her names," Wolfe said. "Lydia Hartwell. She married my father 8 years ago. He died in March." She swallowed. The ring was his. It's silly to say, but it's the Hartwell ring. It's in the portraits. It's in the family stories. When father died, the will left the ring to me. Only it wasn't in the safe. The attorney said it must have been misplaced in the chaos. Then last week, after we decided to sell the townhouse, it turned up, and the day after that, it disappeared again. There are times when people hand you the map and all the roads are arguments. And you reported the theft, I prompted. Yes, quietly. Our attorney suggested discretion, then the note. I didn't know where to turn, except here. You may tell me I was foolish, but whoever wrote that knew about the egg. She glanced at the doorway toward the dining room and back. She hadn't been told. She had guessed. You could watch her put it together as if the house had been whispering. Wolfe's mouth went into the line it uses for tolerable truths. We were, Miss Hartwell, presented this morning with an unwelcome augmentation to breakfast. A ring, as it happens, set with a square emerald, appeared in an egg cup on my table. She closed her eyes for one count. When she opened them, they had more water than before, but hadn't spilled. Then it's here. Oh, she said, and then, apologizing to the air, I'm sorry. Do not be, Wolfe said. You did not put it there. That wasn't a question. He had taken her measure and set it on the scale. She sat a little straighter. No, I didn't, but someone in my family, or near it, might have list them, Wolfe said. She looked at me, then at him, and saw she had walked into a factory that makes lists into conclusions. Lydia, my stepmother. She has been managing the household and the sale. Mr. Sanford Holt, the family attorney. He handled the probate. A friend of my father's, Bryce Denham, he's been at the house a great deal since March, helping Lydia with arrangements, and Alice, our housekeeper. She's been with us 15 years. That is 4, Wolfe said. Do not stop there because 4 makes a neat circle. She cracked a tired smile for the first time that morning. All right. There's also me, and my brother, Graham. He came back from California last week to make sure nothing happened to what remains of the past, which is how he put it. He has strong feelings about money when he's near any 6 then, Wolfe said. Who saw the ring when it reappeared last week? Lydia, me, Mr. Holt, and Alice. Bryce came later and saw it on the table. Graham claims he never did. He says he has no interest in green stones and older superstitions. And who had keys to the safe from which it later disappeared? Lydia and Mr. Holt. She looked at her gloves because they were easier to face. And father's valet used to, but that was before March. Your father's initials, I said. HV engraved inside? Yes. She blinked at me. You've seen it. We have seen a ring, Wolfe said. Whether it is the Hartwell ring is a thing we shall not declare on your word, however confident, or on mine, however often correct. We shall compare. The jeweler's stamp. Whose is it? Blythe and Perrin, she said at once. My father swore by them. Mr. Blythe himself designed the setting for the emerald when father inherited it. Then we can confirm, Wolfe said. Archie, telephone Blythe and Perrin and ascertain the characteristics of the Hartwell ring. Weight, engraving, any marks of repair. Speak to someone who knows, not to a clerk who thinks he will. Do not mention eggs, I stood. Do you want Kramer in the wings for this one? No, he said. And it was absolute. If the police are summoned now, the hand that placed the ring in my house will retract into the nearest crevice and wait a season. I prefer to smoke it out. Evelyn laced her fingers together on the handbag as if she meant to hold them there until someone told them a better idea. Mr. Wolfe, I don't know who would do this. Lydia wants order. Mr. Holt wants everything to be exactly as it looks on paper. Graham wants a clean slate and a check. Bryce wants... She stopped. I suppose Bryce wants to be helpful. Alice wants the kitchen left alone. She lifted her eyes. Why would anyone bring the ring here? To compel me, Wolfe said. To involve myself. Which is both presumptuous and effective. Someone desires an outcome that requires my agency. If I refuse, I am left with an unsolved trespass in my own home. If I accept, I take possession of the lever they have placed in my hand. Very well. He leaned back and shut his eyes for a moment, which is his way of standing up to an idea while letting the rest of him remain seated. You will leave me the note. You will leave me an address at which you may be reached, and one you do not wish me to use unless compelled. You will inform no one that the ring is here. If you have brought a retainer, you will leave it. She had. The envelope came out of the bag and onto the blotter. Money makes a nice sound on leather. It says we are all adults. Archie, Wolfe said, lock the office doors. Fritz is not to admit callers without my instruction. There will be movement through this house today, but not by the uninvited. That was the Brownstones' piece written on a temporary armistice. I took the note, her addresses, and her fear, and filed them where they belonged. The ring sat in the safe like a small, patient catastrophe. On my way to the phone to invite Blythe and Perrin to reminisce about their handiwork, I caught Wolfe looking at the dining room doorway, at the egg still waiting. If you want to understand him, understand that he never forgave an interruption. He only used it. When you work for Nero Wolfe, you learn fast that phone calls aren't just errands. They're reconnaissance missions disguised as casual inquiries. I had Blythe and Perrin's number in my notebook, and inside of 3 rings I had the assistant manager who thought his voice could sell rubies over the telephone. He offered to send me brochures. I offered to hang up. That got me forwarded to Mr. Perrin himself, who was all the things his assistant wasn't. Concise, dry, and unamused by anyone's ignorance of emerald settings. I fed him the bait, an emerald signet commissioned for Harold Victor Hartwell, and he bit with details as sharp as the jeweler's files in his workshop. Square-cut emerald, mounted in yellow, gold. Distinctive side engraving, 2 crossed falcons etched into the shoulders of the band. Inner shank bears HV and script and my firm's stamp. Weight, 12 grams precisely. It was last serviced here in January, before Mr. Hartwell's death. I thanked him, tucked the specifics away, and returned to Wolfe with the news. He inclined his head as if I had delivered a footnote to a book he had already memorized. Then it is indeed the Hartwell ring, he said. Our trespasser has deposited a family's grievance on my table. Evelyn Hartwell had left by then, her retainer and her anxiety secured on Wolfe's desk. She'd gone out the front door with the look of a woman who wanted to glance over her shoulder but was afraid of what she'd see if she did. That left Wolfe, me, Fritz in the kitchen, and a silence that was only broken by the safe ticking faintly in the corner, like it wanted to remind us it was holding the hot potato. Wolfe shut his eyes and put his fingertips together. Archie, the obvious sequence will not do. If we proceed as Evelyn Hartwell expects, asking blunt questions of her kin, we will find ourselves stifled by half-truths and practiced alibis. Whoever placed the ring here will expect my movements to be linear. We must make them crooked. I leaned against the desk. So instead of marching up to the Hartwell house, you want me to take the scenic route? Yes. He opened his eyes. Begin with the attorney, Mr. Sanford Holt. He is the custodian of the estate. He will know where the currents of possession have run, whether he admits them or not. Your manner with him must be the usual, amiable, sardonic, observant. But be precise. Secure his account of the ring's disappearance and recovery, and test his knowledge of the will's details. If he is complicit, he will over-explain. If he is ignorant, he will stumble. Either will tell me more than he intends. I scribbled Holt's name in my book. What about the stepmother, Lydia? She will be approached second. A widow too efficient is as dangerous as a widow too sentimental. But first, Holt. He has the professional habit of secrecy. Break it. It was nearly 11 when I took myself out into the September sunlight, with the Hartwell address in one pocket and Holt's Park Avenue office in the other. Midtown traffic was doing its best to impersonate a Greek tragedy, full of noise, confusion, and doomed participants. I hailed a cab, gave the driver the office address, and watched the buildings scrape the sky while I thought about emerald rings and egg cups. Holt's firm had carpeting deep enough to drown a weak-willed salesman. The receptionist had a voice that could have come from a phonograph record labeled polite disinterest. She made me wait in a leather chair long enough to admire every gold-framed diploma on the wall. Then Holt appeared, tall, lean, with hair as neat as his pocket square and eyes that blinked behind, rimless glasses as if they preferred numbers to people. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, his hand already extended as if this were a board meeting. "You represent Mr. Wolfe." "That's the rumor," I told him, and followed him into his office. It was the kind of room that wanted you to know its owner handled trust funds, not traffic tickets. He settled behind his desk, folded his hands, and gave me a smile that had been practiced in front of a mirror. "How can I assist Mr. Wolfe?" I gave him the outline, neat and lean. The Hartwell ring, its curious disappearance, and the fact that someone thought Wolfe needed a breakfast delivery to get involved. His smile thinned as the details accumulated, but he kept it stitched on like a badge. "The ring," he said, "was indeed listed among Mr. Hartwell's bequests. To his daughter, Evelyn. At the time of probate, the ring was missing. It was, naturally, distressing, but such things happen in the confusion of an estate. When it was found again last week, I advised discretion. Unfortunately, its subsequent disappearance complicates matters. I was prepared to make inquiries quietly, but I see that others have chosen more dramatic measures." "Others," I repeated. "Such as?" He adjusted his glasses. "I cannot speculate. Mrs. Hartwell, Graham, Bryce Denham, each had access to the house, but speculation is not my trade. Speculation's mine," I said, "and sometimes it pays." "Where was the ring found when it reappeared?" "In a drawer of Mr. Hartwell's study. Alice, the housekeeper, discovered it while clearing for the sale. Mrs. Hartwell notified me at once. I verified it, and then it was placed in the household safe. 2 days later, gone. Keys?" "Mrs. Hartwell and myself." His tone was crisp, unflinching, as if he were proud of the exclusivity. I leaned back. "That puts the spotlight right on you and her." He didn't flinch. "So it would seem. But I assure you, Mr. Goodwin, I have no interest in jewels, heirlooms, or theatrics. My responsibility is to the letter of the will. I resent the implication otherwise. He said it too neatly, too rehearsed. I made a note of the way his fingers tapped once on the blotter before going still. Wolfe would like that. I let the silence stretch, then asked about Bryce Denham. That was the first time Holt's composure developed a seam. "A family friend," he said flat. "Too familiar, in my opinion, but Mrs. Hartwell seems to find his presence useful. He has no standing in the estate." "Standing isn't always on paper," I said and stood. "Thanks, counselor. You've been cooperative." His glasses blinked again. "Mr. Wolfe will draw his own conclusions, of course." Back in the cab, heading toward the Hartwell house, I thought about Holt's neat answers, the way they sounded just a little too varnished. A man who's clean doesn't polish that hard. Wolfe would say Holt was either covering tracks or terrified of footprints he hadn't made himself. By the time I reached the Hartwell townhouse, a brownstone with windows like tired eyes, I was wondering which it was. Inside those walls were a stepmother with efficiency issues, a brother with financial appetites, a housekeeper with 15 years of secrets, and a family friend who was too familiar. And somewhere among them, a hand that had slipped a ring into Wolfe's egg cup, daring him to bite. I rang the bell and waited, notebook ready, appetite sharpened. The game was on its feet now, and I had the job of making it walk in circles until Wolfe chose his moment to sit back and spring the trap. The Hartwell townhouse had the kind of facade that announced money without quite confessing how old it was. Stone steps, polished brass, a door knocker in the shape of a lion's head, all the flourishes you expect when people want to say heritage in capital letters. I rang, and the pause before the door opened told me they were either screening callers or still deciding whether to pretend nobody was home. When it swung in, the answer came in the form of a woman who wore widowhood like it was a tailored accessory. Lydia Hartwell had poise, composure, and the kind of beauty that had trained itself not to age too quickly. She wasn't old enough to be Evelyn's mother, not by a long stretch, but she had the air of someone who'd claimed authority in a house the moment she set her bags down. Yes? Her voice was cool, measured, the kind of tone that puts the visitor on trial before they've stated their name. "Archie Goodwin," I said. "I'm working with Nero Wolfe. I believe you know why I'm here." For a flicker of a second, her mouth tightened, but it was gone so quickly you could have missed it if you'd blinked. "Mr. Wolfe," she repeated, stepping aside to let me in. I suppose it was inevitable. Evelyn is impulsive. The entrance hall was generous, the kind where your footsteps echo even if you're trying to be polite. Lydia led me into a drawing room that managed to be both expensively appointed and faintly tired, like a hostess who's smiled too long at guests she doesn't like. There was crystal on the mantel, velvet on the chairs, and a portrait of Harold Victor Hartwell himself gazing down from the wall with the kind of expression that suggested he'd known better days and was reserving judgment on the current company. "Sit, please," Lydia said, taking her own seat on a chaise. She gestured with the smallest flick of a hand, as though commanding servants in some long-forgotten household play. I sat, notebook ready, and gave her a smile I keep for people who think they're directing the conversation. "Let's make this simple." The emerald signet. It was left to Evelyn. It went missing. It reappeared, and then it vanished again. "I want your version." She folded her hands in her lap, perfectly still, like a statue giving testimony. The ring was in Harold's study when we began clearing the house. Alice, the housekeeper, found it. I put it in the safe myself. 2 days later, it was gone. "It has been nothing but a source of discord since discord," I echoed. "That's polite." "Whose nerves has it frayed?" "All of them," she said evenly. "Evelyn, of course. She believes herself cheated of an heirloom. Graham, because he despises what he calls sentimentality but cannot resist an argument over anything with financial value. Mr. Holt, because he resents anything that disturbs neat records. And Bryce, because he finds every excuse to involve himself in matters that don't concern him." "That's a broad net," I said. "Where were you when it disappeared from the safe?" Her gaze was steady, but too steady. "In the house. With Mr. Holt. We were reviewing documents in the library." "Both of you out of sight of the safe?" "Yes. But Archie, Mr. Goodwin, I did not take it. Nor, I believe, did Mr. Holt. If either of us had, why would we stage such a clumsy theft?" "Sometimes clumsy works because nobody believes it's possible," I told her. "That's human nature. Overlook the obvious because it feels too simple." She tilted her head slightly, not quite a smile, more like a curiosity. "And what does Mr. Wolfe think?" "Mr. Wolfe thinks someone wanted him in this game." The ring was delivered to him in a way he couldn't ignore. This time she did flinch, the smallest crease between her brows. "Delivered? What do you mean?" I studied her face, decided she hadn't been briefed. "It appeared in his breakfast service." Which suggests someone in this house not only had the ring but also access to the brownstone. Her composure cracked for just a second, then she folded it back up like a scarf. "That is grotesque." "True," I said, "but here we are." Before she could answer, footsteps echoed in the hall and a man strode in without introduction, as if doors had been made to yield to him. Graham Hartwell, I guessed. Early 30s, dressed sharp, jaw tight, and the kind of swagger that tries to mask desperation. "Who's this?" he demanded, stopping short when he saw me. Lydia didn't bother with niceties. "Mr. Goodwin. He works with Nero Wolfe." Graham gave me a once-over and smirked. So Evelyn really has dragged in outsiders. Figures. She can't stand to let anything go without drama. He flopped into a chair like it owed him rent. Listen, I don't care about that damn ring. I came back to New York to see the house sold, the accounts settled, and the past buried. If my sister wants to play detective, let her, but leave me out. You just put yourself in, I told him. Where were you when the ring went missing? California, he snapped. You can check the ticket stubs if you like. I got here 3 days ago, and I've already had my fill of family relics. If Evelyn wants the ring, let her keep it. I've no use for trinkets. His eyes flickered, though, when I said family relics. That little spark of envy a man gets when he's pretending he doesn't care but does. Wolfe would have loved it. Before I could press him further, the door opened again, and in came Bryce Denham, carrying himself with the self-assurance of a man who believes he's indispensable. He was handsome in a slightly overdone way, with charm polished like a business card. He smiled when he saw me. Goodwin, is it? I thought Wolfe might send you sniffing about. How delightful. Lydia frowned, Graham rolled his eyes, and I smiled sweetly. Delightful's one word. Another is intrusive. But since we're all gathered, maybe you can tell me why a family friend is knee-deep in estate business. Bryce's smile widened. Because some friendships run deeper than wills, Mr. Goodwin. Harold was a dear companion, and Lydia has needed help. I provide it. He glanced toward her with a warmth that made Graham stiffen. As for the ring, I never touched it, though I did admire it once, long ago. An emerald with history. Irresistible. The room was beginning to thicken with competing motives, and I could feel Wolfe's hand at my back even if he wasn't there. Lydia's composure, Graham's hostility, Bryce's charm, all of it circling a green stone in a vanished setting. I jotted my notes, closed my book, and stood. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'll see myself out. Wolfe will know what to make of it all. I walked back into the city air with the sense of voices still clashing behind me. In the cab, heading north, I pictured Wolfe in his chair, lips pressed tight, waiting for me to return and empty the bag, and I thought about the ring in the safe, glowing darkly, while its rightful owners and rivals sharpened their stories like knives. Whatever game had been started, it was only getting warmer. Fritz announced me to Wolfe the way a man announces a change in barometric pressure. I gave Wolfe the Hartwell tour. Lydia's composure with hairline cracks, Graham's tantrum wrapped in tailoring, Bryce's charm that wanted to be situational authority, and added Holt's careful neatness for dessert. Wolfe listened with his eyes half closed, fingertips together, the way he does when he's letting my sentences line themselves up into something he can shoot at. Holt over-explained, he said when I finished. A man can polish truth until it looks like a lie. Lydia is competent and alert to appearances. She has molded the household to her hand. Graham performs indifference and cannot sustain it. He resents the symbolic weight of the ring more than its value. As for Mr. Denham, too familiar is an attorney's euphemism for a guest who lingers. We lack Alice. I figured you'd want me to meet the housekeeper next, I said. She found the ring the day it reappeared, and she's been marinating in Hartwell history for 15 years. Yes, Wolfe said, but not yet. First, precautions. Someone has penetrated this house once. He elected an egg cup for delivery. He did not attempt the safe while the ring was inside. He is either prudent or constrained. Either way, he will test us again. He opened his eyes. Saul? I reached for the phone. Saul Panzer doesn't require speeches. Saul? Goodwin. Our place. Quiet vigil. Watch all approaches. Front, area, service. No knocking. Eyes only unless you see fireworks. And even then, bring a bucket, not a trumpet. I'll brief you in 10. He grunted acceptance and cut the line. Fred at the Hartwell place? I asked Wolfe. Not yet, he said. We first mend our net. Then we cast. I was putting the phone down when Fritz came to the office threshold. Fritz doesn't interrupt unless it's cuisine, sanitation, or crime. I don't rank them because he doesn't. His face had the same gravity it gets when a sauce breaks. Mr. Wolfe. Archie. Something is wrong in the kitchen. All sorts of things are wrong in the kitchen, Fritz, I told him. The coffee is mortal and the eggs are guilty. Be specific. He gave me a look that would have curdled cream. I replaced the breakfast things. I washed the egg cup and returned it to the second shelf, left side between the saucer and the ramekin. 10 minutes ago, when I reached for the paprika, the egg cup was on the counter. Wet. I had dried it. Also, the paprika is where the nutmeg should be. Wolfe's eyelids lifted. It doesn't sound like much unless you live where order is a religion. In our house, an egg cup does not migrate on its own, and paprika doesn't visit other neighborhoods without papers. You left the kitchen? Wolfe asked. I went to the cellar for the jar of preserved morels, Fritz said, offended by the necessity of errands that require gravity. Perhaps 2 minutes. The back door was locked when I returned. It is locked now. I was already moving. In the kitchen, the counters were immaculate, except for the small white cylinder with the blue band, beading faint moisture. The drying cloth lay folded where Fritz leaves it, but not with Fritz's geometry. On the spice rack, paprika sat in nutmeg's slot and nutmeg in paprika's. An exchange without motive, unless the motive was to send a message that would only reach one address. I checked the back door. It showed no scratch or bruise. The chain was on. The window above the sink was latched. The dumbwaiter door was closed. Fritz watched me, indignant in his apron. I am not a fool, Archie. I do not misplace. I know, I said, and meant it. I lifted the egg cup and held it to the light. On the rim, a thin crescent of something, grease, had caught on the glazing. I dabbed it with a fingertip and smelled. Not kitchen. No butter, no oil. It had a faint, metallic emptiness I've met before on typewriter rollers and cheap door handles. Not helpful, but not helpful. Back in the office, I put the report on Wolfe's desk. He scowled at the egg cup as if it had betrayed him, which, in a way, it had. Impertinence, he said softly. A half-wit would steal. A showman would leave a note. This is an assertion of presence. It says, I can touch your house when you blink, I agreed. And it says the hands that touched it know that moving a spice jar will raise more alarm here than firing a pistol into the ceiling. Exactly. His gaze went to the safe, then to the kitchen door. He did not attempt the ring. He came to see whether his lever still lies where he put it. And to let us know he can still reach it, I said. Wolfe rapped the desk with 2 fingers. Call Saul again. Tell him to examine the mews behind us and the service alley. Have him look for someone who does not look up when he passes. Summon Ori to relieve him at dusk. Saul can watch the Hartwell street by then. We shall have sentries both places by evening. While I relayed, the phone rang on the other line. Fritz answered, announced Blythe and Perrin, and gave the receiver to me with the air of a maître d' handing over a rare vintage. Mr. Perrin, a dry voice said when I identified myself, you inquired this morning about the Hartwell ring. Something occurred to me after we ended the call. 2 weeks ago, a gentleman visited with a wax impression, just the shoulders of a signet band. He asked if we would reproduce the engraving, crossed falcons, for a new ring of his. I declined. We do not copy proprietary marks without documentation. He was disappointed. Describe him, I said. A man in his early 30s, well-groomed, suit a shade too modern for discretion. He sounded Western, California perhaps. He did not give a name. He paid in cash for a minor repair on a cufflink, then left. The line hummed while I pictured the Hartwell drawing room and Graham's grin that didn't reach anything you'd want it to. I thanked Perrin and hung up. "Graham," I told Wolfe, "fits the age, fits the travel schedule, fits the attitude." He brought a wax impression of the engraving to the jeweler. That could mean he had the ring at some point, or he had access to it long enough to take a mold. "It could also mean," Wolfe said, "that someone who wishes to implicate Graham took the impression and transferred it. We will not chase a decoy until it runs." He tugged at his lip. "Nevertheless, interesting." The Hartwell symbol was intended to be transferable. That suggests the ring's value to these people is as much emblem as emerald, and emblems can be replicated and swapped, I said. Mr. Holt's neat files make it easier. Documentation proves authenticity until it doesn't. Wolfe's eyes went to the envelope in the safe again, seeing through metal as if it were fog. "We will verify authenticity when it is useful, for now." He broke off and looked past me. "Fritz?" Fritz stood at the door again, this time holding a small brown paper parcel wrapped with string. "This arrived in the mail chute just now," he said. "No stamp, no postmark. Someone slipped it. Wolfe didn't touch it. He never touches unidentified packages if he can help it." I brought it to the desk, studied the knots, neat, quick, a single loop, and eased them open with a letter opener. Inside was a folded index card and something wrapped in tissue. The card had 3 typed words. "Keep breakfast safe." The tissue held a key, flat brass, with a little triangle filed into the head. I didn't have to test it. I knew the feel. It was the exact kind we use for the back service door. We were quiet for a full count of 5. Wolfe's expression went granite. "Archie." "I know," I said. "Someone made a copy. Either from a borrowed key or a press of it, and he wants us to know. Return the courtesy," Wolfe said. "Change the cylinder at once. Take the set from the front and the area door as well. Fritz will finish the kitchen, then observe. He is not to be alone on the ground floor until Ori arrives. After the locks, go to the Hartwells. Begin with Alice the housekeeper. Keys, routines, who comes and goes. Leave your charm at the door and bring back her answers." He leaned back and shut his eyes, and for a moment I saw what the trespasser had tried to do. Nudge the immovable. Wolfe doesn't get nudged. He rebalances and then moves the floor under you. As I pocketed the parcel and headed for the hardware man who knows my face, the office felt smaller, the way a room does when someone has taken liberties with it. The egg cup sat on the blotter, innocent as porcelain can be after it's been used as a telegram. Outside, the sunlight didn't apologize. A man on a stoop folded his paper without looking up. I made the corner quick and scanned the alley. Nothing. But Saul would see what I hadn't, and Alice would tell me what she hadn't meant to. The ring waited in the safe, heavy and patient, while the message was clear enough. Breakfast was the battlefield, and somebody had just placed his flag. Changing locks is not the kind of work that flatters a man's ego, but it does soothe his sense of control. I took the parcel with the copied key down to Quimby's on 11th, where the proprietor knows me well enough not to offer opinions. 2 new cylinders for the service and area doors, a fresh set for the front in case our admirer was feeling ambitious, and 3 duplicates cut while I watched him do it. Back at the brownstone, I swapped the hardware, tested the throw twice, and handed Fritz a key with instructions carved in plain English. "Do not lend, not even to saints." Fritz said saints didn't cook. I agreed and left him to his sauce. Saul's call came low and level. He was on the far corner with eyes on the alley. Nothing yet but men who minded their own business too carefully. I told him to keep liking the scenery and headed for the Hartwells. I took the service entrance on purpose. If you want the truth about a house, you don't ring the lion's head up front where the carpet's thick. You go where the deliveries arrive and the temper gets stored. Alice opened to my knock. She was small and sturdy, 50 if she was a day, with a jaw that could have been used to square cabinetry and eyes that told you what she hadn't got time for. The kitchen behind her was correct. Copper shone, knives in a row, canisters in formation. I felt right at home. "You're Mr. Goodwin," she said, not asking. "That's the story," I told her. "And this is the part where I say I respect an orderly kitchen and mean it." She looked me over like a ham she wasn't sure about, decided not to send me back, and stepped aside. I took a chair near the table that bore the scars of honest chopping, not decorative distress. She stayed on her feet. "It was me found the ring," she started, saving me the prelude. "We were clearing Mr. Hartwell's study for the sale. Bottom left drawer, under the blotter pad. Something made a lump. I lifted the pad, and there it sat, dulled from fingerprints and dust, but I'd know it in the dark. The engraving is family. You don't work this house 15 years without learning the shapes." "Who was there when you found it?" "Mrs. Hartwell across the hall with Mr. Holt." I brought it out on the palm of my hand. She near cried, which I forgive. Mr. Holt said the proper place was the safe and took the keys from her and the ring from me. I didn't like that, but it wasn't my place. "Safe keys?" I said. "Only Mrs. Hartwell and Mr. Holt?" "That's what they say. I've never had one. I've a key to every door I need and some I don't, but not that." She lifted her chin at a pegboard hung with labeled hooks, each tag typed like soldiers' dog tags. Pantry, laundry, cellar, service. "Ever misplaced the service key?" I asked. "Not me," she said, and then frowned at herself. "Last Thursday, the key weren't where I put it. Found it on the hook with the tag turned upside down. I thought I'd done it while I was thinking ahead to supper. Now I don't think that anyone come and go that day who doesn't belong. Tradesmen, the usual. The florist, the char, the fishmonger," her lips pinched. "And Mr. Denham, who thinks a kitchen's a parlor if he can charm the cook. He wanted a candle for mood in the drawing room after dark, which is not my department, but I gave him one to be rid of him. White taper. Later, I swept red wax crumbs out of Mr. Hartwell's study. That's my department. I don't much hold with mysteries, Mr. Goodwin. They make dust collect red wax," I said. "Not from your candle." "No," she said. "Sealing wax. Bits, like someone had pressed it and broken it. I wrapped the sweepings in a square of paper because Mr. Holt has a spell if the Hoover eats something he wants." She opened a drawer and produced a twist of white paper. Inside, enough pinkish red crumbs to ice a fairy cake. She watched me not touch them. "If you want them for your Mr. Wolfe, take them along. Better on your desk than under my broom." "They'll get a warm reception," I said, and slipped the packet into my pocket the way a man pockets a live match. "Tell me about the drawer." She pursed up, replaying. "Marked, not gouged. A little line at the keyhole, like someone learned the wrong key first. Mr. Holt said housemaids pick, and I said housemaids don't. He can think what he likes in his own office. Who spends time alone in the study these days? Mrs. Hartwell does and should. Mr. Holt when he brings papers. Mr. Denham, no business there but goes anyway. And Miss Evelyn when she wants to look at the past and not be seen. Graham wouldn't know a drawer from a door. He uses the table and calls it a desk." "Graham," I said, tasting the name. "He was in California until 3 days ago. Ever take a wax impression of anything in your kitchen?" Her eyes sharpened. "What would I do that for?" "You wouldn't," I said easily. "But a person who wanted a thing copied might. A signet engraving. Say, if you mean the ring," she said. "The shape's more Hartwell than the stone. I've been polishing that portrait since the old Mrs. Hartwell died. The falcon mark is pride in this house, and pride does silly things, like making men want to wear what doesn't sit on their hands." "That's eloquent," I said. "Has Mr. Holt ever used your typewriter?" She blinked. "We've a Remington on a little table outside the library. Everyone clacks at it sometimes. Ribbon's dry and makes the ease look tired," I told them. Mr. Holt says it's fine for labels. Labels like those key tags. She nodded. I let that simmer and looked around the kitchen. Order didn't just live here. It paid the rent. The spice rack stepped in perfect thirds. A white egg cup sat by the sink, plain porcelain with a hairline crack down one side. "You run eggs in a cup?" I asked, casual. "Only Sundays," she said. Mr. Hartwell liked them that way. She watched my finger hover and added, "That one's cracked. I keep it out of habit to fetch beet brine for pickles. It doesn't go anywhere on its own." "Good," I said. "Keep it that way." She folded her arms. "Is my kitchen mixed up in your trouble, Mr. Goodwin?" "Only in the sense that kitchens everywhere dislike being lied to," I said. "And somebody's been lying, with wax, keys, and habits." Footsteps sounded in the corridor, brisk, and Graham angled in with the look of a man who had heard the word kitchen and decided it was a democratic space. He frowned when he saw me, then at the packet sticking out of my pocket. "You again?" he said. "Collecting crumbs for Wolfe?" "Tell him to sweep it home." "I am," I told him. "We changed the locks." "It broke our hearts to do it without you." His mouth curled. "Cute. You can tell your jeweler friend he wasted his time. If someone wanted a copy of our little family birds, he could trace it off the portrait and get close enough to fool the maid." "Blythe and Perrin don't trace," I said, watching his pupils catch and recover. "They also don't cut without papers. They told me so." He shrugged too elaborately. "Plenty of jewelers in town who don't scrapbook their ethics." "And plenty of men who pay cash for cufflink repairs," I said. "How are yours doing?" He flushed, which he shouldn't have if they were doing fine. "Ask my sister," he snapped, and stomped out. Alice's look said she'd put him back in knickers if she could. The phone in my pocket buzzed, a private signal Saul and I use when nothing is put on lipstick. I stepped into the back hall to take it. His voice was still on that calm line. "Visitor for the alley. Mid-30s. Tan line on the wrist like a man who lost his watch recently. Carried a florist's satchel with no flower showing. Tested the new service door cylinder with something in his palm and walked off when it didn't love him." "Direction?" I asked. "West to the avenue, south 3 blocks. Met a man in a grey hat. Didn't talk there. Took a phone booth that smells like gin and called somebody for 1 minute. Then grey hat peeled off east. Our boy turned north on 10th. I have him again. If you want me to know where he sleeps, say so." "Not yet," I said. "Know where he eats. And see where grey hat lands if you can track both. Ori will take the brownstone at dusk. You can come watch the Hartwells front." He grunted. "Copy." I went back into the kitchen and thanked Alice for her time, which in that room is currency. She gave me a nod that could have been approval if it weren't so busy. On my way out through the passage, I stopped at the study. The bottom left drawer wore the thin scratch she'd mentioned. The Remington sat on its little table with a ribbon so tired the E's looked like they were napping. I typed 3 words on an index card: bread, milk, eggs, and dropped it in my pocket to go keep company with the crumbs. No fingerprints, no melodrama. Just documentation. Wolfe prefers household proof to laboratory proof. It keeps the case paid for and the conscience quiet. Outside, the afternoon had the color of brass. I called Wolfe from the stoop and gave him the gist. The crumbs, the drawer, the tired E's, Graham's wax errand at a jeweler he pretended not to know. Saul's florist who didn't carry flowers. Wolfe said. "The tendencies converge. We are not yet ready to jerk the string, but we shall arrange it. Return. We will bait 2 hooks and see which fish believes himself. Discreet. Anything from our admirer?" I asked. "Yes," he said, and the word was sour. A second message through the chute. "Locks are manners. Habits are doors." Pfui. He mistakes epigram for wit. Hurry, Archie. Breakfast will not be served until we are safe to enjoy it. By the time I got back to the brownstone, Ori had relieved Saul at his post outside, and Fritz was waiting in the hall with his lips pressed tight enough to leave marks. He handed me the second message Wolfe had mentioned, a strip of heavy card with the typed line, "Locks are manners. Habits are doors." No envelope, no flourish, just smug brevity. I carried it into the office, where Wolfe sat glowering at it as though it had personally ruined his lunch. "It's an aphorist we're dealing with," I said. "The kind of fellow who thinks crime is improved with fortune cookie wisdom. Want me to see if the corner deli has a typewriter that drops tiredese?" "Not necessary," Wolfe muttered. "The Remington at the Hartwells suffices." Alice confirmed the ribbon's exhaustion. "Our intruder toys with us, but he cannot help leaving evidence, however oblique I laid the paper twist of wax crumbs beside the new card." Wolfe gave them one glance and gestured for the safe. I unlocked it and placed the crumbs and the note inside with the ring. He leaned back, fingers templed. "We are not yet at the confrontation, Archie. But the time approaches. The ring has become a cipher, not merely an heirloom. Someone is attempting to establish a chain of possession. If he can prove, or counterfeit, authenticity, he controls not only property, but identity." "That is the real prize meaning," I said. "It's not just a rock in a band. It's a family flag. Whoever waves it gets to call themselves Hartwell royalty." "Precisely." Lydia clings to order. Graham resents symbol more than value. Evelyn claims legacy. Holt desires neat testamentary closure. Denham, he curled his lip. He desires proximity. Each motive tangles with the others. Someone believes that by drawing me in, the tangle will unravel in his favor. The phone rang and I caught it. Saul's calm voice came over the line. "Our florist without flowers has a name. Jack Tyrrell, alias of a sometime burglar with a fondness for wax and locks. He ate at a lunch counter on 12th, met Grey Hat again, and passed him a folded card. Grey Hat is Bryce Denham." "Confirmed." They spoke 2 minutes and parted. Tyrrell boarded a bus east. Denham walked back toward the Hartwell street. "You want me on him?" "Hold for the moment," Wolfe instructed when I relayed. "Do not confront. Continue to watch. If Denham employs Tyrrell, he has already risked exposure. A man who hires a burglar to plant jewelry in my egg cup is reckless or desperate. Both are useful qualities." When I hung up, Wolfe pushed back his chair with a groan that meant not fatigue, but decision. "Very well. We shall accelerate. Tomorrow evening, Archie, we will invite our 6, Lydia, Evelyn, Graham, Holt, Denham, and Alice, into this office. Before that, we shall collect 2 final strands. You will see Inspector Kramer discreetly tonight. Give him the crumbs, the notes, and the index card you typed on the Remington. He will be displeased to be included late, but he will prefer inclusion to exclusion, and he will verify without fanfare whether these crumbs contain resin consistent with sealing wax. If so, the implication is forgery. If not, we recalibrate. Kramer's going to ask why you're hoarding jewelry in your safe instead of handing it to him. Let him ask. My reply will satisfy him more than silence. You will also instruct Saul to discover where Tyrrell sleeps. If Tyrrell has taken an impression of the Hartwell ring, we must know whether a duplicate exists already. If it does, then the point of this charade is not merely theft, but substitution. The evening turned into errands. Ori watching the brownstone, Saul shadowing Denham's associate, and me ferrying evidence uptown to Kramer, who greeted me with his usual affection, which is to say, he growled like a man who had just bitten into a lemon. He didn't like wax crumbs without explanation, but when I told him Wolfe suspected forgery tied to an estate squabble, he grunted that it was domestic poison, the worst kind, and promised his lab boys would put the crumbs through their tests before dawn. He also warned me that if Wolfe was keeping jewelry out of police custody, he'd come down on us like a ton of subpoenas. I told him Wolfe slept better under weight and left. By the time I returned, Wolfe was upstairs with the orchids, leaving me the quiet of the office and a safe that hummed with secrets. I sat with my notes, sorting through the Hartwell lineup. Holt, too polished. Lydia, too contained. Graham, too defensive. Evelyn, too earnest. Alice, too practical. Denham, too helpful. And threading through all of them, a burglar with wax on his hands and a florist's satchel on his arm. Fritz brought me beer, because he claims it oils the brain. When Wolfe came down, he had that look he gets when orchids have told him something humans can't. He lowered himself into the chair, reached for the second note, and said, "Archie, tomorrow we bait the trap. Tonight we wait for confirmation. When the laboratory tells us what those crumbs once were, we shall know whether the Hartwell ring is unique or imitable. And if it is imitable, then someone has already tried." It was late when the phone buzzed again. Saul, voice low. "Tyrell's flops on West 19th, rented under the name Carr. I watched him go in an hour ago with a satchel heavier than when he came out this afternoon. Denham's nowhere near. Want me to nose inside?" "No," Wolfe said from his chair, and Saul heard him as if he were in the room. "Maintain surveillance. If the satchel contains a duplicate, he will not rest. Easy until he tries to use it. We must catch not only the act, but the intention." I signed off and looked at Wolfe. So tomorrow, all suspects in one room, Denham sweating beside Lydia and Holt, Graham chewing the furniture, Evelyn trying to breathe, Alice wringing her hands, and you peeling them like onions. "Yes," Wolfe said, closing his eyes. "But not until I know whether I possess the Hartwell ring, or only a symbol meant to deceive me. Until then, Archie, no egg cups. My appetite is elsewhere. I left him there in the quiet, the safe humming at his elbow, while outside on the street Ori kept watch, and somewhere a burglar named Tyrell dreamed of locks he hadn't yet tried." The game had grown teeth, and Wolfe was waiting for the right moment to bite back. Kramer called at 9:30 with the tone of a man who wants you to know he didn't sleep just to make you comfortable. I put him on speaker because Wolfe likes his indignation unfiltered. The crumbs were sealing wax. Resin, shellac, a touch of pigment, and not the kind you drip on love letters. "This was pressed," Kramer said. "You've got flattened surfaces, ridges where a bezel edge bit and lifted. Somebody was making or testing impressions. And your index card matches the sample you gave us off that Remington, weak E's, high R's, a chipped A. Same machine typed your fortune cookie lines. I want the ring, Goodwin." "You'll see it," I told him, "with witnesses enough to satisfy your mother." He grunted, which, from Kramer, is a doily. When I hung up, Wolfe let out a breath he'd been saving. So, the notes were typed in the Hartwell house. The wax was used to take impressions of a signet. The aphorist plays in their rooms, and our florist friend carries a satchel, I added. Saul says his name is Jack Tyrell, and his hobbies are locks and wax. He met with Denham twice. Yesterday Wolfe rolled the words in his mouth like olives. Denham is not stupid. He is vain. Vanity breeds schemes that rely on presentation. He may intend to produce a ring, ours or a simulacrum, and compel acceptance by theatre. We shall give him a stage. He dictated the invitations. I typed them on our Olympia, which would offend the Remington loyalists and satisfy my preference for legible ease. "Mrs. Hartwell, tomorrow, 8 p.m., my office. You will attend with your attorney. Mr. Graham Hartwell. Likewise. Mr. Denham, your presence is required. Ms. Evelyn Hartwell, Ms. Alice, you are requested. There will be no police yet. There will be witnesses. We shall determine what is Hartwell property and who has trespassed upon it." Each letter ended with a line Wolfe enjoys because it sounds like courtesy while being in order. "Kindly bring any objects you believe relevant." I messengered Holtz to Park Avenue, then took the rest myself. If you want people to come promptly to an ambush, let them see the eyes of the man laying it. Lydia received her envelope as if accepting an invitation to a charity luncheon she didn't plan to enjoy. "We'll be there. she said. "If Mr. Wolfe believes he can impose order on this, I shall be grateful to watch him try." Graham read his and smirked. "Sure, I've always wanted to see the big man do tricks." "Bring your tricks," I said. "Cufflinks you paid cash to repair, for instance." He flicked the paper back at me. "Ask your jeweler friend where he left his sense of humor." Evelyn opened hers and looked relieved that the word requested could be obeyed. When I told her there would be no police for the moment, her shoulders dropped a fraction and then stiffened. "I want this done," she said, "but not at the expense of whatever is left." That's the kind of sentence you only finish in your head. Alice took hers in the kitchen, read it once, and tucked it behind a tin at tea. 8 means supper at 6, she said, which is what duty sounds like when you've been married to it for years. You'll get better answers with full stomachs. On my way out, I drifted into the study. The Remington sat with dignity it didn't earn. On the blotter lay a stick of red wax with teeth marks in it, somebody's idea of versatility or impatience, and beside it a white taper half melted in a little brass dish. I took in the arrangement, the telltale crumbs in the carpet fringe, and left them for Kramer's boys to appreciate if it came to that. In the hall, Bryce Denham arrived in a rush of cologne and importance. He saw the edge of an envelope in my hand and gave me a smile that wanted to join a club. "Goodwin," he said. "More summons?" "An invitation," I told him and gave him his copy. He skimmed it and looked pleased. "Excellent. At last a venue that suits the drama." He didn't say whose drama. Back at the brownstone, Saul called with a midday bulletin. Tyrell left the flop with a smaller satchel. Spent 20 minutes in a basement workshop off 18th, one of those half-legal lapidary holes where they fix things they didn't break. Came out lighter and careful. He's been circling the Hartwell block like a man practicing innocence. Denham met him once, no pass made. Just talk. "Let him orbit," Wolfe said when I reported. "He will either attempt the brownstone again, which would be suicidal, or he will deliver his product to someone who believes himself daring. Either way, we will have him in this room by proxy." He telephoned Blythe and Perrin and spoke to Mr. Perrin with the kind of formality that makes lawyers sweat. He requested a house call at 8:15 for the purpose of confirming an item without fanfare. Perrin agreed because jewelers respect confidentiality the way priests respect confession. Wolfe also had me call Saul to amend our configuration. Ori would hold the brownstone front. Saul would watch the Hartwell Street from 5 on, and at 7. He'd follow Denham, not Tyrell. "If Denham carries a ring," Wolfe said, "we want to see where he means to present it." At 5, Kramer growled again. The lab had nothing new beyond refinement. The wax included a trace of green pigment. Emerald is sentimental, but the real point was the pressed faces. "He wasn't sealing envelopes," Kramer said. "He was taking prints. Don't make me come sit in your office while your fat friend solves a burglary for sport." "You wouldn't fit in the red chair," I told him, and got away with it because he was busy. By 7, the brownstone had the pacified hum of a stage before the curtain. Fritz conferred with me on logistics: water and beer for Wolfe, coffee for Holt, tea for Lydia, nothing fragile near Graham. The office chairs stood at their stations. The safe, fed and content, murmured in its corner. The egg cup was out of sight. Saul's last call before showtime reported Denham leaving the Hartwell house alone, hand light, face lighter. "No satchel?" Saul said, "but he's carrying the kind of smile you wear when you hope for applause." At 3 minutes to 8, the bell rang. Holt first, punctual and tight. He took the yellow chair and sat like a statute had required it. Lydia came with Evelyn on her arm, more a public arrangement than maternal comfort. I put them where they'd be seen and not cowed. Alice arrived on foot with clean hands and a face that didn't intend to be impressed. I gave her the green chair and she improved it. Graham blew in last of the family. a little late to make a point and a little early to avoid being accused of it. "Mr. Denham?" Wolfe asked me without looking. "On his way," I said. "Saul's half a block behind him, and Mr. Perrin will be 5 minutes after that." "Good," Wolfe said, and let his lids drop, which with him is the equivalent of chambering around. Denham made his entrance at 8:06, exactly the sort of man who would be late enough to be noticed and not late enough to be scolded. He had no satchel and no visible bulge, but when he took his seat, his right hand made a small, affectionate pat at his breast pocket, like a man checking his pen. He flashed Lydia a look that had promise baked into it and gave Evelyn a smile a cousin would use when trying to be a brother. Wolfe didn't move. He let the room fill with its own oxygen until everyone started to breathe too loudly. Then he opened his eyes and spoke as if completing a sentence that had begun at breakfast. "We are here," he said, "because someone has used my house as a conveyance for property not his, and because that someone imagines himself clever. He is not. He is merely inconvenient." He inclined his head toward me. "Archie, the ring." I went to the safe, took out the envelope with the emerald signet, and brought it to Wolfe. He did not touch it. He let it sit on the blotter where every eye in the room could land on it and declare it theirs or pretend they wouldn't. Denham didn't look at it, which told me he was dying to. Graham looked too long, and then not at all. Lydia held herself still the way women do when a doctor speaks. Evelyn swallowed. Holt blinked. Alice didn't fidget. Kitchens teach better manners. Wolfe said, "In a few minutes Mr. Perrin of Blythe and Perrin will arrive to tell us whether this is the Hartwell ring or a counterfeit. Before he does, we shall hear why it was found in my egg cup, who has attempted to reproduce its mark, and what each of you expects to gain from that." The bell rang again. I went to the door and let in Mr. Perrin, compact and dry, carrying a loop and the kind of velvet pad that decides things quietly. Denham's right hand made the breast pocket pat again, quicker this time, like a man keeping a secret warm. Wolfe saw it without turning his head. He never misses habits. He opens doors with them. Mr. Perrin gave a short bow to Wolfe and placed his case on the edge of the desk as if setting up a field hospital. He spread the velvet pad with neat fingers, then picked up the envelope I had laid down. The room tilted toward him. Lydia sat forward. Graham leaned back too hard. Evelyn's hands gripped her knees, and Denham's smile fixed itself like a stage mask. Perrin slipped the ring into his palm, set the loop in his eye, and began the small, deliberate movements of a man who does not hurry when paid to be exact. He turned the band, tilted it under the light, and nodded once to himself before setting it on the pad. "This is the Hartwell ring," he said. "I recognize our stamp, the falcon engravings, the weight and cut of the emerald. It has suffered some handling, but his genuine silence ballooned." Evelyn's breath caught audibly. Graham smirked again, though his lips trembled a little. Lydia kept her eyes on Wolfe, not the ring. Denham tapped one finger on his knee, too fast for casual. Alice simply exhaled, as though the housekeeper's ledger had one column balanced. Wolfe inclined his head. "Thank you, Mr. Perrin. Kindly remain. Your impartiality will serve us." Perrin sat on a side chair, folding his hands. Wolfe turned his gaze across the semicircle of suspects like a lamp beam that could scorch if it paused too long. "The ring is real. Yet someone attempted to duplicate it. We have evidence of sealing wax, impressions, and a typewriter in the Hartwell study used to taunt me. The question, then, is not whether the ring exists, but who wished to forge its twin and why." Holt cleared his throat, tight as a hinge. "Surely, Mr. Wolfe, the only issue is theft. The ring belongs to Evelyn under her father's will. It should be restored to her custody immediately." "Plea," Wolfe said. "If the matter were that simple, you would not all be here. Theft, yes, but also contrivance. Someone believed a counterfeit ring would serve him better than the real." Mr. Denham blinked, smiled, thinly. Me? What an absurd suggestion. Absurd? Wolfe's brows rose. Saul Panzer observed you in conversation with Jack Tyrrell, a burglar with skill in wax impressions. Twice. Tyrrell was later seen leaving a workshop with a satchel lighter than when he entered. Do you deny acquaintance? Denham's charm stuttered but didn't collapse. I know many tradesmen. If I exchanged words, it was incidental. A coincidence, nothing more. Indeed, Wolfe said dryly. And your hand strays to your breast pocket whenever the ring is mentioned. You have brought something here. Produce it. Denham froze, then gave a little laugh, fishing from his pocket a small box, silvered and neat. He opened it with theatrical flair and held up another emerald ring, so like the one on Perrin's velvet pad that gasps broke around the room. Evelyn pressed a hand to her mouth. Graham sat forward, eyes gleaming. This, Denham announced, is the Hartwell ring. Or so I was told when it came into my possession. I intended to present it here to settle the matter once and for all. If there is another ring, then perhaps someone has been duped. Perhaps indeed, Wolfe murmured. Mr. Perrin. The jeweler took the second ring with no flourish. He examined it with the same cold care, loop in place, fingers turning. After a long pause, he set it down beside the first. A forgery, he said. Clever, but flawed. The falcons are shallow, the weight is 0.5 gram less, the stamp is imitated, but not ours. Whoever made it had a good mold, but poor discipline. Denham's face flushed. Then I was deceived. Someone gave me this as genuine, not gave, Wolfe said. You sought it. You employed Tyrrell to help create it. You meant to present it, claim it as the lost ring, and thereby secure standing in the Hartwell affairs. Through Lydia, perhaps. Did you hope to play savior, to deliver a ring no one else could find, and earn her trust and gratitude? Lydia stiffened. Bryce, but Denham raised his chin. That's nonsense. I acted to protect Lydia, to protect the family. If Holt or Graham were conspiring to profit from the ring, I wanted to prevent them. If I made a mistake in method, I regret it, but my motive was noble. Wolfe's lips twitched. Noble men do not break into kitchens, rearrange spice jars, or leave riddles in another man's breakfast. You underestimate your own vanity, Mr. Denham. You wished not merely to help, but to be indispensable. Holt seized the chance. You see? This entire disruption stems from Denham's foolishness. The true ring is here. Return it to Evelyn and let us conclude. Not so fast, Wolfe said. His gaze shifted to Graham. You, sir, also sought to duplicate. You carried a wax impression to Blythe and Perrin. You paid in cash for cufflink repairs to conceal your errand. Do you deny it? Graham's eyes glittered. I deny nothing. I made the impression. But I never had the ring. I wanted proof that the so-called legacy could be forged, that it meant nothing. A symbol, not substance. I wanted Evelyn to see that chasing ghosts was folly. If a jeweler could reproduce it, then the heirloom had no power. Evelyn shook her head, tears brimming. You hate father's memory so much you destroy it? Memory isn't money, Graham snapped. I came back to close the past, not worship it. If that ring was worth fighting over, I wanted to prove it could be faked. Then maybe you'd let go. Wolfe grunted. So, Denham created a counterfeit to ingratiate. Graham tested forgery to demolish. Both meddled with wax and lies. Meanwhile, the real ring was smuggled into my house, into my egg cup, as leverage. Who placed it there? His eyes moved to Lydia. She met his gaze evenly. Not I. I wanted order, not theatrics. If I wished the ring found, I would have put it on Evelyn's finger myself. Yet, Wolfe said, the kitchen door key was copied. The service key misplaced. And someone with household knowledge chose an egg cup, an object of breakfast ritual, as the stage. That points to one person. All eyes turned to Alice, who sat stolid in the green chair. Her lips pressed together, then parted. "Yes," she said. "I put it there. I found it gone from the safe one night when Mrs. Hartwell and Mr. Holt were arguing in the library. I knew it wasn't right. I'd seen what greed was doing to them all. I wanted it out of that house. I knew Mr. Wolfe was a man who could not ignore a wrong if it touched his breakfast. So I brought it while Fritz fetched morels from the cellar. I swapped jars so you'd know someone had been." Evelyn gasped. Lydia's face hardened. Holt sputtered. Alice went on, steady as stone. "I didn't want it stolen or counterfeited again. I wanted it safe until truth came out. If that was wrong, then it's on me. But at least the ring's still here, not pawned or paraded." Wolfe leaned back, lids heavy. "There is honesty, and there is folly. But yours, Alice, has spared worse." He opened his eyes. "Mr. Perrin has authenticated the true ring. The forgery is Denham's vanity. Graham's wax was sabotage. The rightful heir is Evelyn. The rest is dross." Denham half rose, flustered. "But my intentions, plea! Intentions are missed. Actions are weight. You trespassed, connived, and failed. Be grateful I do not summon Kramer to clap you with your burglar." Perrin packed his loop. Evelyn wept quietly. Graham scowled but said nothing. Lydia sat rigid. Alice folded her hands, her eyes calm now. Wolfe closed it with the authority of a judge. "The matter is settled. The Hartwell ring shall go to Evelyn, verified and secure. The counterfeit will be given to Inspector Kramer as evidence of idiocy. Mr. Holt will draft documents affirming custody, lest we suffer this again. And you," his eyes bored into Denham, "you will leave the Hartwell house tonight and not return. Vanity is unwelcome company." No one spoke. Wolfe reached for his beer, poured and sipped. "Archie, see them out." I did, one by one, through a silence you could spread on toast. When the door shut on the last of them, I came back to find Wolfe lifting the true ring in its envelope, sliding it into the safe with finality. He looked at me, and his eyes softened. "Breakfast tomorrow," he said, "shall be eggs, unmolested." And just like that, the brownstone's air exhaled, the sanctity restored, the case finished. Dinner would follow, and afterwards Wolfe would make some comment on human folly, but for now, peace had returned to the house that had been trespassed. I walked the last of them out and shut the door on a silence that had shape to it. Fritz breathed again. The house did too. Wolfe let the safe door whisper shut and leaned back as if the chair had been begging him to. He didn't speak until Fritz came with beer and a plate of something that smelled like the apology dinner makes after a day like this. "Tomorrow," he said, "Holt will bring papers. We will not release the ring on courtesy alone. We will release it on record." He sipped, eyelids drooped. "Call Saul." Saul sounded as if he were sitting in Denham's pocket. "He's moving," he said. Face like a man who just lost his mirror. "East 2 blocks. Turning down a side street I don't like is good," I told him. "If he meets our florist, share the bouquet with Kramer." "Already on the line," he said, and clicked off to finish the dance. We didn't wait long. 20 minutes later, the phone gave its short burr and Kramer's voice came gravelly and satisfied. "Your boy Denham met your boy Tyrell, passed a little box like it was a jewel. Guess what was inside? My men took Tyrell with tools and a counterfeit, which saves me paperwork about whether it's Tuesday. Denham did some speech about noble intentions. I gave him some speech about conspiracy to commit fraud. I'll hold Tyrell and sweat Denham a bit. If you've got any more valentines to slip under doors, do it now." "Inspector," Wolfe said, "you have our counterfeit, our burglar, and our gratitude. Tomorrow morning, you will have the typed notes and the wax as exhibits of foolishness. Tonight, let men sleep." Kramer snorted. "You sleeping is my civic duty," he said, and rung off. It should have felt done, but cases don't shut cleanly until Wolfe puts the stopper in the bottle himself. He sent me to the cabinet for the index cards. Cream, good for receipts, and dictated the bones of a transfer. Acknowledgement by Holt as executor. Witnessed by me. Per Rin to attest the gem. Lydia to sign her consent to avoid another week of bickering. Evelyn to accept, with the proviso that any claims be aired before noon or be deemed the wind. Morning came with a kind of hush you notice only when you didn't have it yesterday. Breakfast had its usual ceremony. Wolfe eyed the egg cup as if considering forgiveness. He cracked an egg with ecclesiastical restraint, tasted, and allowed the corner of his mouth to repent of its frown. Fritz took that as absolution and put more toast on. At 10 sharp, Holt arrived with the expression of a man who had slept between two law books. He had the documents, clean, tight, unavoidable. He'd also found his spine, or maybe Kramer had loaned him one. Lydia came with him, perfect as a comma in a sentence she still hoped to finish, and Evelyn, pale but resolved. Perrin, punctual and dry, brought his loop like a seal. Alice came too, in case truth needed a mop. Wolfe had me open the safe. I brought the envelope out as if it weighed more than it did. Perrin laid the ring on velvet, gave it the last of his attention, and nodded. Holt slid the papers forward. Lydia read every line like a woman who has learned not to let men put their names where they shouldn't. Evelyn signed, hand steady. Wolfe had me sign as witness, and Alice, at his request, added her name on a separate sheet, acknowledging the thing she had done and the reason she had done it. She looked at me when she finished and said very quietly, "It is not my house. But kitchens are my country. I do not like when men use a table to fight on." I told her if she ever wanted a flag, I'd stitch a frying pan on it. When it was done, Wolfe told Evelyn to hold out her hand. She did. He didn't put the ring on her finger himself. That would have made him part of their myth. He gestured. Perrin did it, a jeweler crowning legitimacy. Evelyn's breath left her like a debt paid. She looked not at Lydia, not at Holt, but at Alice. They shared a nod that was not forgiveness and not apology, just recognition that someone had carried a weight the right direction. Graham didn't come. Holt said he had appointments. If those appointments were with a mirror, good. The fellow had work to do on the man in it. Denham, by report, was with Kramer, rediscovering humility. Wolfe sent Fritz to the kitchen for coffee all around, tea for Lydia, and sat there in his chair without moving his feet, and moved every other piece instead. "There will be no more burglaries," he said, as if declaring a season closed. "There will be no more typewritten anonymity. If any of you feel tempted to employ a metaphor as a weapon again, may I suggest the expense of one honest sentence instead?" Holt colored. Lydia's lips tightened. Evelyn tried on a small smile and kept it. They left in a different order than they had come. Perrin first, on velvet feet. Holt, with his portfolio, held a little less like a shield. Lydia upright. Alice last, after checking the time and calculating supper. Evelyn lingered in the hall, turned back and said, "Mr. Wolfe." "Thank you," as if that were a currency that might hold its value. He inclined his head. "You don't bow to gratitude. You nod to it so it knows it's been seen." By noon, Kramer called to say Tyrell had sung enough for a matinee. He admitted the wax, the workshop, the counterfeit, and Denham's part in trying to reassure the family. "You'll testify if I need you," Kramer said, which as a question had all the charm of a subpoena. Wolfe said if absolutely required, he would leave his chair. Failing that, his record of our own intrusions, timed and witnessed, would suffice. Kramer grumbled, which is his way of curtsying. Wolfe was finishing his second beer when I finally asked him the bit that had kept a corner of my brain lit all night. Alice said she brought it while Fritz fetched morals. But the ring was in your egg cup at breakfast the day before that little paprika ballet. 2 visits? Yes. He shut his eyes, which with him is a sign he's opening a drawer and reading the label inside. First before dawn, with a copied key. The egg cup was chosen because it is unlikely we would eat breakfast without noticing a stone among the eggs. She intended me as a custodian. Later, after the tumult of yesterday, she returned the key and rehearsal of habit to inform us, and our intruder, that the key was no longer valid and the house alert. She wishes to tidy even the means of her mischief. He opened his eyes. I do not approve of trespass. I can, however, appreciate a trespasser who returns tools. That leaves the question of how she got the key in the first place, I said. It does, but I decline to waste appetite on it, he said. Keys are unexceptional in their promiscuity. The service door cylinder invited invention. We have corrected that Saul came by in the afternoon to sit on my couch and look like a street nobody remembers seeing. He reported Denham's prospects, poor, Tyrell's future, measured in months of institutional boredom, and Graham's whereabouts, a club that would have taken him with or without jacket if he had money. He'll cool, Saul said. Or curdle. Your call. He'll be back to California as soon as the air here smells like responsibility, I said. He's allergic. By 4, the brownstone had returned to its natural weather. You could feel the sanctity settling, like dust that decides it belongs where it lands. Fritz sang very softly at the stove. The orchids had their stolen jungle air upstairs. The office had its hum. I went through my notes, the aphorisms, the wax, the Remington with its tired ease, and filed them under things humans do when symbols are heavier than objects. At 6:30, dinner arrived with the confidence of a man who knows he is the reason rooms were invented. Wolfe ate with concentration. You'd think from the gravity he gives a sauce that it had applied to law school and been accepted. When he set his knife and fork down and dabbed his lips, I knew the curtain. Emblems, he said, eyes on the middle distance. Are dishes men over salt? They preserve. Nothing. They merely burn the tongue. A ring is gold and stone until appetite gives it jurisdiction. Then it becomes a flag, and fools die marching around it. He reached for his beer. I prefer eggs. They are honest. They announce themselves and satisfy decently. You're saying breakfast is the opposite of an emblem, I said. I won't argue. At least an egg doesn't hire a burglar. He gave me the look I get when I've teed it up just right. Precisely. If men would eat and keep counsel with their hunger, they would not require me to sit here and reprove their metaphors. Bad for business, I said. On the contrary, he murmured. There will never be a shortage of men who confuse themselves with what they own. He closed his eyes, content now that the house had its proportions back. Tomorrow at 8, Archie. Soft-boiled. Unmolested, I cleaned the blotter, returned the egg cup to its proper shelf, Fritz's geometry exact, and checked the new locks on my way upstairs. On the landing, I looked back into the office, at the chair that seemed to have grown roots again. The ring had gone to a finger, the counterfeit to a cell, the burglar to Kramer, and the brownstone to itself. As closures go, that's a pretty good list. In the morning, the Gazette would have something about a minor arrest and nothing about eggs. That's fine. Some victories don't photograph. They sit in a white porcelain cup with a blue band, and the only headline that matters is the one you don't print. Peace served hot. When a case ends in the brownstone, it doesn't crash shut like a slammed door. It eases into silence, the kind that feels deliberate, like a book closing itself. After the ring left with Evelyn under Holt's paperwork, and Kramer took Denham's counterfeit with the promise of charges to keep him honest, Wolfe had gone back to his orchids. That's what he does. When people have made their noise and mistakes, he retreats to flowers that don't lie. For me, The rhythm of normalcy meant typing my notes. You don't work for Wolfe without learning to leave a paper trail that could sink or save you depending on how he points it. So I typed the whole business. Egg cup, ring, forged wax, family quarrels, and Denham's vanity parade. Reading it back, it sounded exactly like what it was. A fight over an object until Wolfe turned it into a fight over meaning. That evening, Wolfe finally came down for beer. He didn't say much until dinner was out of the way. Fritz had produced trout in almond butter, which Wolfe praised with the solemnity usually reserved for Latin verbs. When he finally leaned back in his chair, the weight of the case dropped with his words. "Symbols," he said, "are dangerous. Men invest in them a faith they do not invest in their own conduct. The Hartwell ring was gold and emerald, yes, but its true substance was appetite. Lydia desired order, Graham contempt, Denham admiration, Evelyn memory. Alice alone saw it for what it was, a burden too heavy for fools to carry. She put it here because she knew I would not let appetite eat it whole. "You're saying breakfast solved the case?" I told him. His lips twitched. "Breakfast compelled me. And compulsion, properly applied, is the lever Archimedes desired." "Only Archimedes didn't have Fritz to cook for him," I said. He ignored me, which is how I know I've landed a joke where he doesn't want to admit it hit. The Gazette printed 2 inches on Denham's misguided attempt to manipulate an estate. Evelyn's name was kept out of it, which suited her. Graham vanished west again, Lydia kept her dignity, Holt got his order restored, and Alice went back to her kitchen where objects stay put and wax is for sealing jam, not identities. As for Wolfe, he had his house returned to silence, his egg cups washed and stacked, his locks secure, and his orchids blooming as if crime were fertilizer. He hadn't moved his feet, but he'd rearranged every other piece on the board until the right one stood. When I closed my notebook on the last line of dictation, Wolfe reached for his beer and said, "Not to me, but to the air. Fools who mistake symbols for substance will always summon me. That is their punishment." I capped the pen, stacked the papers, and stood. "And my punishment?" I asked. He looked at me at last, eyes hooded but not unkind. "Your punishment, Archie, is to watch them and write them down. That is sufficient." I grinned. "Could be worse. At least the eggs are hot." And with that, the house folded back into its old rhythm. Fritz humming in the kitchen, orchids breathing upstairs, Wolfe in his chair and me with a notebook, ready for the next time someone decides the only way to make themselves important is to slip trouble into a breakfast cup, 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 into a breakfast cup,